If you are going to be purchasing a home, how much cash do you actually need to buy the property? So I've put together a spreadsheet for us to take a look at, which lays out the numbers. So let's say you're buying a home for $500,000. Every time you buy a home, no matter what the purchase price is, you're required to give a first deposit, an earnest money deposit. That first deposit can be whatever number you're most comfortable with. Typically, it is $1,000. And if you want to strengthen your offer, make your offer more appealing to the seller, and show how serious of a buyer you are, you could do $2,000, $5,000, whatever number you're most comfortable with. But typically, that is $1,000. And that is due upon accepted offer. So if your offer is accepted today, that deposit is due when the offer is signed and accepted by the seller. So that's your first deposit. Your second deposit is due when the purchase and sale is signed. So typically that would be 2 weeks after the accepted offer. You would be owing a second earnest money deposit. Now, that amount can be 3 to 5% of the purchase price. Again, it could be any number that you are most comfortable with. I've had clients that have done $1,000 for the first deposit and $500 for the second deposit because that's all that they can afford. But typically, it would be 3 to 5% of the second deposit. That's what a seller wants to see. So in this case, at a $500,000 purchase price, your first deposit is $1,000. Your second deposit, let's say you're doing 3%, which would be $15,000. That is all going to be due before you get to the closing table. So that's all coming out of your pocket during the process within the first 2 weeks of having your offer accepted. You're going to owe that money. Then when you get to the closing table, you're going to owe closing costs. Those fees include your attorney fees, title fees, insurance, items like that. That's all included in the closing costs. And then the remainder of your down payment is also going to be due. So in this case, I did a 20% down payment. So the remainder of your down payment, these deposits, the first 2 deposits actually go towards your down payment. So if you're putting 20,000 or if you're putting 20% down, you're going to be putting $100,000, which is 20% of 500, $100,000 minus your 15,000 and minus your 1,000 deposits that you've already given. So at closing, you're going to be giving 84,000 plus 10,000 in closing cost. So before closing, you're going to owe 16,000. And at closing, you're going to owe 94,000. Now, a common question is, if I'm selling my home, do I need to give these deposits because I'm getting all of my cash at the closing table? Yes, you're still going to be required to give deposits. So that is when I've had some people say, well, I can do $1,000 for the first deposit and $500 for the second deposit. It's not necessarily as strong as an offer, but you do what you're most comfortable with and what you can afford. So that's the best thing, is to stick with what you're comfortable with and what you can afford. You never want to become house poor or give more than you can actually afford to give, especially when there is a risk of losing these deposits if you were to back out for a reason that is not stipulated in the contract. So this is what you can expect to pay out of your pocket during the actual process of purchasing a home. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. Your lender can also help you with these numbers and make sure that you're putting down what you can afford. Sometimes a lot of people, you might be putting down, if you're a first-time home buyer, you would be looking at, is that correct? Yeah. So if you're a first-time home buyer, at 3.5% down, so 500,000 times 3.5%, your initial deposit, your down payment is going to be 17,500. And if you're putting most of that down with your initial deposits, then at the closing table, you'll only be bringing that 1,500 plus your closing costs. Another way to save some money might be to ask for the seller to cover your closing costs as well. So your closing costs and prepaids, that can sometimes be covered by the seller if you include that in your offer. So there are ways to save. There's things that you can do, and you can still buy a house if you don't have this kind of cash on hand. There are down payment assistance programs and all sorts of first-time homebuyer programs. So if you have any questions at all, reach out to me. I can connect you with a lender, or we can talk it through together as well. I look forward to chatting with you and talking you through the home buying process.